Well, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, has resigned, saying that he's leaving politics altogether. He's been in office since 2010, making him one of the longest running officials in the European Union. Now, this follows a fallout over immigration. He had been hoping to limit the flow of immigration and asylum seekers, but was unable to do so due to party divisions. Was this the last straw for the prime minister, or were there many others? We invited a guest today to discuss it, journalist and analyst Ralph Schoellhammer. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Okay, so is this a surprise in the Netherlands? Because this guy has had a lot of press in sort of the grander Western press for a long time. So maybe you can give me your reactions to this resignation.
It definitely is a surprise because whatever one thinks of Mark Rutte, I mean, he has been a survivor in the political scene in the Netherlands for 13 years, as you pointed out at the beginning. Some people tended to call him Teflon Rutte because no matter how elections ended, somehow he ended up being prime minister. He was supported by Geert Wilders. Then he was in a coalition with more left-leaning parties, then with more right-leaning parties. So he was very versatile when it came to staying in power. So my suspicion is, and I guess we're going to talk about this again in a year, I'm not so sure if he's leaving politics altogether or if he's leaving Dutch politics altogether, because the Secretary General of NATO needs to be reassigned next year. Ursula
Yes.
von der Leyen is going to step down as the head of the European Commission. And those are very, very interesting positions. And within the European establishment, Mark Rutte would be a perfect candidate for both of those positions. Now,
Wait a
personally,
minute.
I don't think he would. Sorry, sure.
Ursula von der Leyen, did I know this? Because my last notes say she was scheduled to keep her job until 2029. So when was that announced? When did I miss
Well,
that?
they were talking about kind of that she switches from the European Commission to becoming Secretary General of NATO. That has been reported by the Telegraph last week. So she doesn't necessarily have to finish out her term. So there could be a kind of a switch that Rutte takes over one of those two positions, and then either von der Leyen stays as the head of the European Commission or switches to NATO. So the question then
Okay.
is Rutte gonna be staying out of politics altogether, or is he just leaving Dutch politics and moving on to European Union? Which at this point, to be honest, I would find more convincing.
Yes, because then we see this chessboard of familiar leaders who have a similar agenda when it comes to, I mean, we could COVID, war, inflation, environment, right? It seems like he checks all the boxes for the agenda, and so this then makes it a question: is he ripe for other um, World Economic Forum positions or other positions for this same platform?
Exactly. So this
Yeah.
is this is something that's going to come, right? Everybody, but this is one of the things where the European Union kind of moves slowly but determinantly in the background, which is who is going to head the next top positions within the EU bureaucracy. Because as we've seen, to give you one quick example, there was a little bit of fallout between the European Parliament regarding a nature restoration law and the European Commission. The bureaucracy ultimately, for now at least, calls the shots within the European Union. So whoever is in charge of the bureaucracy, kind of without any kind of democratic oversight, can actually do a lot of things. So for the Dutch people, to be quite honest, whether those who didn't like Mark Rutte, if they would be better off with him being the head of the European Commission compared to being the prime minister, I'm not entirely sure within the current framework which one
Yeah.
of those would be better for the Dutch people.
Right. And so he was able, though, to successfully pull through the charge on the Dutch farmers. That law that said that they were going to take away farms of livestock farmers in certain environmental areas was successfully passed through the European Commission. So there's no reason
Exactly.
to think that that agenda would stall, even if he's not in power, right?
Oh, and there's another thing that makes this all suspicious. I mean, of course, the matter of migration and refugees and this whole complex of different topics has always been a major issue kind of for the European electorate. But as you just correctly mentioned, Rutte has kind of weathered the storm of the Dutch farmers. I mean, they had significant electoral losses. The Dutch farmer citizen movement, the BBB, has been rising in the polls. Currently, it looks like they might be even the strongest party after the elections. But that all of a sudden, kind of without any previous warning, he would pull the plug of his own leadership over the matter of asylum, that just seems very odd. As you correctly point out, he was in charge for 13 years. So he was responsible for Dutch immigration policy for 13 years. And now all of a sudden he's saying, I can't do this any longer. I find this very suspicious. He's not too old. He's not, he doesn't, as far as we know, right? He doesn't have any kind of health issues. So that, and it went very quickly. So he had this kind of conversation with his coalition partners, and all of a sudden he threw his arms into the air and said, I can't do this any longer. It's all over. That's not how Dutch politics usually works. So that he's not, again, or maybe he really says, it's possible that he says 13 years has been enough. I'm going to retreat to, well, it's not going to be a farmer, I assume. So he's going to retreat to something else and give up politics. But
farmer, right?
it's so I don't believe. So I'd be very careful to listen. Well, when he said he's not apparently going to be the major candidate of his party in the elections in the fall. Now that seems to be clear. But that this is the end of politics for Mark Rutte, I believe it when I see it.
And you would think, given the recent protests and uprising and riots in French-speaking countries, that now is a good time to win on immigration issues. You could successfully step up and say, no, now is the time to limit immigration, and we see why in other places, right? I mean, that was his stance, though, right, to limit asylum seekers and immigration. I don't see why anyone, would not be able to, like a talented enough politician like he seems to be, couldn't get that through.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, he also knows, of course, kind of where the wind is turning within the Dutch electorate. So if he would have had tried to formulate, let's say, a more restrictive course in migration, he could have pushed it through in the coalition. So I don't buy this, that his two small coalition partners were saying that they were so adamant about particularly family reunification that they more or less brought him down. Nobody's even saying that, right? It was really him. I think they were surprised as well. It was really him who all of a sudden said, I'm out of here. And that just, as I said before, that strikes me more as a reason than a cause. So this strikes me as something. Yeah. He knew that probably the next elections would not end very well for his party. I think he was well aware that maybe this time he could not somehow kind of weasel back into the prime ministerial position. So better to, cut the Gordian knot now and bring himself into a position to be an attractive candidate for either a position within the European Union or a position maybe with the UN or another one of those large international and transnational bodies, than being remembered as the prime minister who lost his final election. So, as I said before, I can be wrong here, but politicians usually, without a clear reason, a scandal, let's say, or age or health reasons, don't simply end their political careers.
Yeah, we saw that with Jacinda Ardern, right? She was
exactly.
Yeah, and so this does seem to be a page out of that playbook. We don't know if we're sure, but we have seen Jacinda Ardern step up to World Economic Forum positions. So, yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to place your bet there on the bingo game of globalist politicians, I guess, if we call them. And we'll wait and see. Thank you so much for this context. It really helps a lot.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Great to talk to you as always. And you can find Ralph Schoellhammer on Twitter. Last time I told you to do that, people had a hard time spelling it out, but we're spelling it on the screen. So you can find him, and I do recommend you follow him. So thanks again for your time.
Always great to be on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.